identified as much as our kid is.
Emotions running high outside Queen's Park today. Parents and advocates rallied against the changes to autism programs by the Ford government. And it was just as loud inside the legislature as MPPs argued over autism and that other controversy.
They blustered, they threatened, and they bullied anyone who raised concerns.
I've never seen a more anti-police caucus than the one sitting across from us today.
Ron Taverner won't be the next OPP commissioner. He withdrew his name yesterday, but that didn't stop the opposition from hammering Ford over the hiring process. Just part of another raucous day at Queen's Park. But first tonight, CBC Toronto has learned that 25,000 complaints were submitted to the so-called teacher snitch line. It was set up by the Ford government after the province reverted to the old sex ed curriculum, allowing parents to report teachers who didn't stick to the program. 27 of those complaints were escalated. Chris Glover has details on the emails that were deemed worthy of further investigation in the CBC Toronto exclusive.
Now, they shouldn't send sex. This is disgusting.
Queer parent Becky McFarland reads complaints from the government's so-called teacher snitch line.
She intends to teach children about same-sex marriage. I do not want my child learning about this vile act.
CBC Toronto obtained the complaints from a Freedom of Information request. In 25,000 complaints, ministry staff deemed 27 as potential teacher misconduct for the College of Teachers to investigate. Some of the 27 alleged racism or sex assault, but others flagged as potential misconduct involved classroom conversations about same-sex marriage.
And I can't imagine who was on the receiving end of that comment thinking it was appropriate to pass that on to the Ontario College of Teachers.
The snitch line riled up protests last year. Since parents can already lodge complaints directly with the college, the fear was the snitch line would be used to scare teachers to ignore topics such as gay families. Now that it's been shown to lump complaints of sex assaults with conversations of same-sex couples, a University of Toronto education professor says the snitch line has crossed the line.
You can't compare somebody having sexual relationships with a student and then compare that same complaint with a teacher who's teaching about LGBTQ issues. Teachers have the professional responsibility to provide factual information.
McFarland recently lost a lawsuit against the Doug Ford government's decision to scrap the Liberals' 2015 revisions to sex ed. Government lawyers argued teachers are still able to discuss the removed subjects. But McFarland says the information CBC dug up about the snitch line proves that's not true.
We are hated in so many ways, and that there is actually a mechanism that is being created by our provincial government that is allowing people to espouse that in a formalized way.
McFarland says she'll continue to teach her 11-year-old their family isn't wrong, whether teachers can back up the lesson or not. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
The autism debate continues at Queen's Park. As we told you off the top of the show, hundreds of parents, therapists, and teachers showed up to protest changes to the program. Advocates have been making their voices heard at the legislature daily ever since the changes were announced a few weeks ago. Farah Morelli joins us now live from Queen's Park. And Farah, a lot of people showed up, but one minister in particular was absent today.
That was the Minister of Social Services, Lisa MacLeod. She said yesterday that she'd received threats against her safety, and that's why she wouldn't be at this rally. And just this evening, we confirmed with Ottawa Police that they've actually arrested and charged somebody with criminal harassment and uttering threats against her. There's no details on just what happened. But of course, all of this controversy stems from the government's changes to the autism funding program here in Ontario. What they've essentially done is, in an effort to shorten wait lists, they've capped the funding that families are eligible to receive. Today at the rally, I spoke to one family that says they're now looking to sell their house just to get enough money to be able to support their son's therapy because of the cap.
In the sea of protesters on the lawns of Queen's Park today, we met Nev and Will Dundas, holding a photograph of their son Dylan, who's about to turn 6. He's on the autism spectrum, being treated with IBI, intensive behavioral therapy.
Our son is on the spectrum, and we want to be here to support all the other parents.
How the changes affect your child?
Our son is in full-time IBI right now, so the change means that he's no longer going to be going at his current school. He will have to be integrated into the TDSB school system. And he spoke with the principal, and there's absolutely no support for him when he starts come middle of April.
How much does treatment cost for your son?
It's roughly $93,000, $94,000.
That's a year.
Yeah. We are actually considering selling our house so that we can have some money to extend his current therapy to get him to transition to the school a little bit better. And, you know, from that point on, who knows if we can afford a couple of days a week. A couple of days a week is what he's going to get.
As a teacher and as a mother, I say this to you, Doug Ford. You will be held accountable.
The Dundasses weren't alone in their cries against the government's changes today. Protesters came by the busloads. Parents, children, teachers.
Well, emotions ran high outside at this rally. Inside Queen's Park, tempers flared as the government defended its move to make these changes to the autism program.
3 out of 4 children in the province of Ontario have been denied service by their Ontario government, and we are changing that.
During question period, Minister Lisa MacLeod showed no signs of backing down while being heckled by protesters.
Go outside and look at us and my daughter that you're abandoning.
MacLeod never came to speak to the protesters or to reporters today.
What has changed? You know, this is a day where there's thousands of... Why is the minister avoiding questions?
We understand that not everybody is going to be happy. This is a very sensitive file.
That message wasn't good enough for the Dundasses today.
We're selling our home to be able to support our son. What parent would want to make that decision? What options do we have?
Now, Dwight, the Dundasses weren't the only ones I spoke to today who told me they're having to make significant financial decisions in the coming weeks over this. There were many parents who told me that they're looking to pay upwards of $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year for the treatment that they say their children need.
Farah, when do these changes then come into effect?
Dwight, the changes come into effect just in a few weeks on April 1st, and a lot of the people I spoke to today say they're optimistic but not hopeful that anything on the government side will change before then.
Thank you.
Will the Premier stop hiding and call a public inquiry today?
I want to thank the leader of the police-hating party for the question.
As you saw, Doug Ford was back in the legislature for the first time this week, and just in time to answer questions after his personal friend Ron Tavener withdrew his name from consideration to head the OPP. We will have more on that coming up at 6:30. And we will soon know more about how the PC's spending plans work. Their first budget will be unveiled on April 11th.
You're going to see relief to families. You're going to see our promises kept. And one of the promises that the Premier made is that no frontline workers will be cut.
Actually, Premier Ford promised that no jobs would be cut, not just frontline workers. Either way, a timetable for eliminating the deficit will be detailed in the budget. The PC's put that number at $13.5 billion. It will be tabled 3 weeks after the federal Liberals reveal their pre-election spending plan. Meanwhile, at City Hall, Council is finalizing Toronto's budget today, and it is official. Property taxes are going up this year. Some say, though, the less than 4% hike doesn't go far enough to support city services. City Hall reporter Lauren Pelly joins us live now with more. And Lauren, this debate has been going all day. Is it still going?
It's still going. They're just taking a quick break now, but they'll be back here tonight to keep talking about the city's $13.5 billion budget. And I'm told this was quite a challenging year for everyone involved. The city came up short in terms of the expected land transfer tax revenue by around $80 million. There's also a $45 million hole where the city's expecting money to come from the federal government for refugee settlement. But I asked this morning, that money is not confirmed just yet. Even so, the mayor and his allies have talked about a balanced budget that was achieved without even doing major tax hikes. Others say it doesn't go far enough and leaves the city falling short in terms of services and repairs.
They don't raise taxes through the roof.
Mayor John Tory got his way. Council voted overwhelmingly in favor of keeping this year's property tax increase at the rate of inflation.
The people of Toronto have told me over and over again that they too, in the majority, favor this balanced, responsible approach.
It means a roughly 2.5% hike, and when bundled with other fees, it brings the total increase to nearly 3.6%. On an average property tax bill, homeowners will have to pay around $100 more this year.
The mayor has said today and on many other occasions that keeping property taxes low makes Toronto more affordable, and I take issue with that.
Councillor Gord Perks called on his colleagues to add another increase of 2%.
If property taxes grow faster than inflation, the services grow, and that helps low-income people.
Other councillors pitched extra increases as well as a way to support everything from snow clearing to public housing repairs. All their proposals were voted down, including one councillor's motion calling for a 0.006% hike to fund a swimming program in Regent Park.
And I thought it was a very modest budget adjustment to give this community what it needs to be successful.
I just spent 12 hours outside trying to get them into programs. I was successful, but it was, spent all night in the cold, minus 22 degrees, to get them into programs. And I think that more spaces are obviously needed.
Critics also say the budget falls short because it doesn't address a multi-billion-dollar backlog for maintenance. The grand total needed to repair and maintain TTC vehicles, social housing, and park spaces across Toronto will rise to nearly $10 billion over the next decade.
We've been told that the number of potholes and the drivability and walkability of our roads and streets is going to decline. We've been told that important programs to help young people to find a path out of a violent life are not being funded to the extent that council wants to fund them. The list goes on and on and on.
So since council didn't back any more property tax hikes, Councillor Mike Layton put forward a motion calling for a return to the polarizing car tax, the $60 a year vehicle registration fee that Toronto scrapped back under the Rob Ford administration. He says it could bring in around $55 million into the city's coffers. But based on how the votes have been going so far today, I don't think we can expect that will be a return anytime soon. Dwight?
All right, it's going to be a long night over there. Thank you for covering this, Lauren.
What has become clear through the various testimonies is that over the past months, there was an erosion of trust between my office and specifically my former principal secretary and the former Minister of Justice and Attorney General. I was not aware of that erosion of trust. As Prime Minister and leader of the federal ministry, I should have been.
Don't call it an apology, but the Prime Minister is admitting to a communications breakdown between his office and Jody Wilson-Raybould. As you heard, Trudeau says her resignation from cabinet came after an erosion of trust. But as David Cochrane shows us, that has only intensified the opposition's calls for Trudeau to step down.
It was an act of contrition that did not include an apology.
Almost every day as Prime Minister, I learn new things. So I can tell you without a doubt that I have taken and will continue to take many lessons from these recent days and weeks.
The Prime Minister admits he could have done things better, but insists nobody really did anything wrong.
In regards to standing up for jobs and defending the integrity of our rule of law, I continue to say that there was no inappropriate pressure.
No inappropriate pressure, he says, just strong disagreement and intense misunderstanding as the Prime Minister and his staff pushed the former Attorney General in a quest to protect jobs.
I think people understand that a Canadian government always needs to stand up for workers, needs to stand up for jobs, needs to look to grow the economy, and that is something that all Canadians right across the country expect of their government.
It's now beyond dispute that he and his office bullied
and threatened Ms. Wilson-Raybould in an attempt to get her to let SNC-Lavalin off the hook.
Nothing the Prime Minister said or could say will convince the opposition. But Trudeau is trying to convince Canadians they can still trust his government. He's going to hire outside experts to review many things, including the way his office interacts with Cabinet.
Being able to demonstrate that we continue to defend our institutions despite internal challenges is something that I think Canadians can deeply be reassured by.
That's the hope, that despite a month of controversy and 2 cabinet resignations, Canadians will believe that everything is fine. David Cochrane, CBC News, Ottawa.
And NDP leader Jagmeet Singh isn't satisfied either. He's also sticking to his message and repeating his calls for a public inquiry into the matter.
But we didn't see an apology. We didn't see really an admission of fault. We saw kind of a sidestep, collateral kind of comments that were made. It didn't really get to the heart of the matter. We've got 2 senior ministers that resigned. We've got Ms. Wilson-Raybould and Ms. Philpott, both of them pointing to serious concerns about political interference and not having trust in Mr. Trudeau and his government. This needs to be addressed.
How are Trudeau's words resonating with people here in the GTA? Jacqueline Hansen spoke to a few commuters about the SNC-Lavalin story. Take a listen.
What do you think of that response? Is that enough for you to hear from the Prime Minister?
Well, at this point, I think that's the best he can do because he's trying to save face and trying to get on with the show and save all the seats and anything else that he has left in the remaining months before the election. So I don't think anybody would have done anything differently.
What do you think of how the Prime Minister has handled this?
I think right now he's being very careful because he knows that 6 months from now, 8 months from now is the election. So I think he's being quite careful with what statements he makes. I think it's the kind of situation where he realizes that it's possible that this might blow over. I think that might be his hope and his sort of group's hope right now.
Would this influence how you vote in the fall?
Sure. Yeah, dependent on the inquiry and the findings, yes, it might.
This is the first federal election that I'll be voting in, but I've lost a little bit of trust in the Liberals because of this.
I don't know, it's like who's the better of the evils, right, at this point? So I guess he was a great poster child for the country and for politics here. He put it on the world map, but he's got to do better than that in terms of keeping it up, sustaining it.
I'm Lorenda Redicop. This looks just like a shed, but it could actually be part of the solution to solving the homelessness issue. I'll show you more of what's inside coming up.
Folks, our Colette is a little under the weather today, but she so wanted to tell us about that warm-up coming on Sunday that she came into work anyway.
Oh, here I am. That's right. Yeah, the weather sometimes gets the best of me, so I'm a little under it. That's okay. I wanted to start with a look at, we've got to look at this temperature trend because finally we're getting there to seeing that warm-up. So as we look at what happens with our highs tomorrow, -1. Hey, it's not seasonal, but it's so much closer than what we've been. Saturday looks like we'll be close to that, right up to the freezing mark. We should be more like around 2 to 3 at this time of year. But look at Sunday, and this is 10 a.m. So Sunday morning, the temperature is actually going to spike. It'll be a little bit breezy as the system's going to be pushing through, and then the temperature is going to fall later in the day. But I just love seeing that as we go into Monday. Hey, we drop back, but you know what? We're getting back to where temperatures ought to be for this time of year. So I think we'll kind of be okay with that. Right now, though, it is -8 out there, and it certainly feels closer to about -18. It's still an extreme cold weather alert. We are looking at a clearing turn overnight tonight with high pressure building in. So looking at that low of -14, feeling like -20. So another cold start to the day tomorrow, but we're going to pick it up a little better into the afternoon with that high of -1. Dwight, when I come back, I'm going to break down how that system's going to move through here at this storm system on the weekend, okay?
Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
The birth of a city, the beginning of an institution, and the beginning of the end of a political marriage. Our Throwback Toronto segment is coming up a little later in the show. A major car maker has just issued another recall. It's on an engine that's known to suddenly fail, even catch fire. But the recall comes too late for a BC family that faced a life-threatening emergency on an icy highway. Go Public's Rosa Marcatelli has their story.
Ready?
Danelle Collette cringes when she thinks about the moment her vehicle's engine failed at 120 kilometers an hour without warning on a snowy highway in BC.
We felt that our lives were in danger. My 8-month-old was in the back seat. We were passing a semi-trailer at the time. You know, we could have been seriously injured.
What the couple didn't know at the time is Hyundai and its sister company Kia had already recalled millions of vehicles with the same or similar engines over fears a high-speed stall could cause a crash or the engines could burst into flames. The couple didn't know because their vehicle, a 2012 Hyundai Tucson, wasn't included in any of the recalls.
I was quite surprised that they would only recall some of these engines.
Safety watchdogs are blasting the car makers for taking too long to act. The recalls for what are called Theta 2 engines started almost 4 years ago.
We're looking at several millions of vehicles, both in the United States and Canada, that we believe are at risk of catching on fire.
300 engine fires have been reported in the U.S. in less than a year. Transport Canada says 3 have been reported here. A mechanical inspection of the Vancouver couple's vehicle found the rod bearings had failed, the exact same issue identified in other vehicles that were covered in the recalls. But Hyundai told them they would have to pay the $8,000 cost of replacing the engine, more than the vehicle's worth. When the couple complained to Transport Canada, it told them it's investigating the recalls.
I think part of the reason why Hyundai dragged their feet was they didn't want to have to pay for all of those engines.
Hyundai Canada responded to Go Public's specific questions with a general statement, saying it's working closely with Transport Canada to share information and to identify how to best ensure the safety of our customers as quickly as possible. Kia Canada also says it continues to work cooperatively with Transport Canada and will address any issues or findings as they arise.
They need to come clean with their consumers. Exactly. You know, how risky is this? Do they have a solution?
Hyundai just issued its latest recall involving these engines. More than 30,000 vehicles in Canada, 500,000 in the U.S.
And I'm hoping that they take this seriously.
It's unclear if the couple will be covered under the latest recall. But after Go Public contacted the dealership, the couple was told the cost of the engine repair would be covered no matter what. Rosa Marcatelli, CBC News, Calgary.
I'm Marivelle Tarouk at the Make Lemonade space in downtown Toronto. Coming up after the break, I will tell you how CBC Toronto is marking and celebrating International Women's Day with a panel of amazing and accomplished women. So stay tuned for that. We're back after the break.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Ahead of International Women's Day tomorrow, CBC Toronto is hosting a live panel discussion featuring 4 women who have blazed the trail in business and are now helping other women do the same. Maribel Tarouk is moderating the discussion tonight. She joins us live now. And Maribel, take us through who is there other than an accomplished reporter like yourself.
Okay, well, we're in great company here, Dwight, because it will be a room full and a panel of women who are slaying it at their careers and in their industry. So it's going to be a pretty exciting conversation tonight. You're getting a sneak peek, actually, at what our set is going to look like. The panel will join me here, and I will be here as well. And we'll be taking questions from our audience as well as from online. So we'll have 4 panelists, and I'm going to introduce you to one of them now. This is Shiz Aoki, and she is the co-founder and CEO of a science communications company called biorender.io. So Shiz, I just wanted to ask you, why was it important for you to be part of a panel discussion like tonight's?
I generally tend to shy away from the spotlight, but I've been afforded so much support from incredible women in my life that I feel it's my duty almost now to kind of give back a little bit.
Often that's what we hear from a lot of women in industries, that they don't sort of speak up for themselves. And for you, what was it that made you feel like this is something that you maybe should be doing more of?
Yeah, I think it's, science in itself is also going through this sort of era of change. A lot of women are now speaking up. People who have been, sort of behind the scenes and actually doing a lot of the work and not getting credit for it are stepping forward. So I feel like, it's kind of this movement that I feel like I'm, compelled to be part of.
And that's the thing, and the industry of science has not been dominated by women. Do you feel that there is a change within your industry in science and in technology? Because there does seem to be a push for it, at least in schools, to get more girls involved in those fields.
Absolutely, and I think efforts like today are really helping to move that dial and push the conversation forward. And so super excited to be here, really honored to be part of this panel tonight.
It is great to have you here too. And one of the things, I'm not going to get you to talk about everything we're discussing on the panel tonight, but one of the things I wanted to find out from you was, once the discussion has happened and people have had a chance to sort of digest it and sit with it, what do you want them to take away from our discussion this evening?
I think I would love if we may all made a bit more connections. This room is full of amazing, incredible, ambitious women tonight, so I would love to connect with as many as I can.
And I think we're well on our way to doing that. Thank you, Shiz.
Thank you.
So we will be at it starting at 6:45 live this evening. And so we've got a wide audience, we're hoping as well, because we're going to be taking questions, Dwight, from our online audience too. It's something that I've been really looking forward to, and I'm honored to be part of it. And there is quite an amazing room of women already I can see gathered here tonight.
Have fun hosting, Maribel.
Thanks, Dwight.
Now that panel will be streamed live on our CBC Toronto Facebook page starting at 6:45 tonight. We'll also post it so you can watch it anytime you like, even after you finish watching our show.
We're finally hearing from Doug Ford in the controversy surrounding the appointment of his friend and Toronto Police Superintendent Ron Taffner as OPP Commissioner. What the Premier has to say coming up.
Premier Doug Ford has finally responded to the Ron Tavener controversy. He attended question period today, and the opposition were quick to take aim. Lisa Shing now with the squabbling that followed soon after.
The unparliamentary behavior started even before the questions did.
I would be remiss if I didn't, and I'm sure members of the gallery and the chamber would join in with me to welcome the Premier back to the chamber here today. We missed him.
Doug Ford has been gone all week. In fact, a quick tally shows he's missed 11 out of the last 18 question periods. So today, the NDP was quick to capitalize on his attendance.
Will the Premier stop hiding and call a public inquiry today? Does the Premier still want to argue that Brad Blair was wrong?
Late yesterday, Toronto Police Superintendent Ron Tavener withdrew his name for the role of OPP Commissioner, saying it was causing too much controversy. This week, OPP Deputy Commissioner Brad Blair was fired. He's been challenging the hiring of Tavener because Tavener is a friend of Doug Ford. Today, Blair's lawyer said he wants full accountability and compensation for the actions that led to his firing. All week, the NDP echoed Blair's allegations of political misconduct. Today, Ford hit back.
I found it disgusting, Mr. Speaker, how he was berated. He was attacked by the opposition. I want to thank the leader of the police-hating party for the question. I've never seen a more anti-police caucus than the one sitting across from us today. The NDP,
Premier, take your seat.
In fact, MPPs were chastised a few times.
The tone of this debate is deteriorating. It impresses no one.
Outside the chamber, the Minister of Community Safety admitted no wrongdoing in this months-long saga.
The NDP chose to sully an individual's reputation.
All we've done is said he has a bad choice of friends.
So now the search for a new OPP commissioner starts. The government says there is no timeline. The Integrity Commissioner is still investigating Tavener's appointment. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
3 people have been arrested in a devastating triple homicide near London.
Our thoughts are with their families and friends who will unfortunately be reliving these tragedies throughout the enduring court processes.
Melissa Trudy Miller, Alan Porter, and Michael Jameson were found dead in a remote field near Oneida Nation of the Thames last November. They were all close friends from 6 nations and Indigenous Reserve, approximately 120 kilometers away from where their bodies were found. Miller was 7 months pregnant at the time. Police announced today that Nicholas Shipman, Jamie Beaver, and Thomas Bomberry were charged in their deaths. A woman, Christian Bomberry, was previously charged with accessory after the fact to murder. The family of billionaires Honey and Barry Sherman want to demolish the home where they were murdered. The Apotex founder and his wife were found dead in their basement in December 2017. They were found with belts looped around their necks beside the indoor pool. In an application to the North York Community Council, an agent representing the family says the house has bad memories and stigma because of the murders. They want to level the house, clean up the site, and sell it. No one will buy the home as it stands, the letter states. A new study suggests that using space around and above transit hubs could mean thousands of new homes would be built a year. Advocates say this could be a reality if the province allowed looser rules around building. Greg Ross looked into this untapped real estate opportunity to see how, obviously, it stacks up.
There are a lot of areas around here that are completely empty.
No, if you pan around here, you just see an enormous amount of potential.
This is Kipling Station on the Bloor Street subway line. It was also listed in a new study by Ryerson University as one of the many underdeveloped transit hubs across the province.
Yeah, there are hundreds of meters of land all around us here that should be developed. What this speaks to is in previous generations, the priority was all about the car. If you look at the subway station, it's a perfect symbol of the issue. You have this tiny little subway station, which is dwarfed by the major roadway running overhead.
It's clear that Ontario's pre-disco 1970s zoning bylaws don't reflect modern consumer demand or modern times.
Today, the Ontario Real Estate Association, led by former Conservative MPP Tim Hudak, called on the province to force municipalities to change bylaws to enable more growth around transportation hubs. The Ryerson study suggests there's more than 1,500 square kilometers of land ripe for development. David Amborski is one of the authors.
Also, a number of the transit zones in the Toronto area are in what's called the Yellow Belt, which are and what are called stable single-family neighborhoods, and they're protected under the official plan for the city.
This urban planner agrees change is needed and says some of the issues can be solved by more mid-range buildings, 6 stories or less.
But what's really lacking is what's called the missing middle, where you can achieve a lot of density.
The study suggests if all of these transportation hubs were to reach their full potential, 4 million new homes could be created. But realistically, 20,000 new homes per year could meet the current demand across the province. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Housing was on the minds of some people at the Toronto Reference Library today. Jagmeet Singh was hosting a town hall when the issue of the city's homeless crisis came up.
In the middle of Yonge Street, all you see is homeless people lying under tents, lying under blankets, and we walk past, and we look, and we walk past. We speak about housing, but we don't talk about the homeless.
You're absolutely right to point out that there's a serious problem of homelessness in our country, and shelters, while they might be a short-term solution, are not a full-term solution. We need to make sure that every human, every person in our country has the opportunity to live with dignity and respect.
The federal NDP leader is fresh off his win last week in the Burnbury South by-election. He spoke to fellow NDPers today about his national platform, including expanding health care, building affordable housing, and transitioning to a green economy. One man struggling to find housing in the city came up with his own unique solution. He didn't want to live in a shelter, so he built his own. Lorenda Redekop has this look at his home on wheels.
Welcome to Chateau Dan. Open up and you can see inside. It's fairly rudimentary, but it's well insulated.
This is where his friend Dan now sleeps, all his own idea.
Dan's always been a pretty sharp and inventive guy. And all of a sudden he announced that I'm going to build myself a house.
There's a fold-down bed, lights, heating, and a catchy name.
The Cramper, because it's kind of like a camper and the space is a little cramped.
Dan himself didn't want to be identified, but did agree to an interview. He created this to solve his own housing problem, well aware of the dangers of sleeping on the streets.
I just didn't want to become a statistic, but I also didn't want to become someone in a shelter or a respite center. I can close the door at night, I can lock it. It is relatively safe in here.
It's mobile, built on old bicycle wheels. He wheels it around and stays on friends' properties. The metal base is part of an old ladder.
All right, so it is called the Cramper for a reason, but I can almost stand up in there with this peaked roof.
There aren't any windows, though.
Do you think this could be considered illegal, actually?
Probably in somebody's eyes. Somebody's going to find a reason that no, it won't work.
It's just one example of unusual shelter ideas to get people off the streets. In Oregon, they've created fast-build mini homes that resemble covered wagons. In the Yukon, it's tiny homes for the homeless. In Vaughan, they're turning old buses into shelters. Housing advocates say Dan's invention is creative, but not the answer to end homelessness.
Or it's the best solution for a really terrible situation. And I think that Torontonians, while they may be excited by this, probably know in their heart of hearts that this is nowhere near good enough and that we really, really need to have people housed.
Dan is now thinking about a new and improved version. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
Certainly not a solution for the kind of winter we've been having, Colette, because it's been cold.
Oh, it has been, and we've still got another cold night ahead, Dwight, so an extreme cold weather alert. And hey, -6, that was the high today. Are you kidding me? An average high this time of year should be closer to 2 degrees. Okay, well, we're done with this. We're moving on to greener pastures, or warmer ones at least, once we get into tomorrow afternoon. But for now, it's -8. That's how it feels well, minus 17 with the wind chill. And, you know, we've got high pressure that is building in, and that can be good and bad. It's actually reinforcing some of the cold air for tonight with the clearer skies, but it will give us the sunshine through the day tomorrow. But a couple of systems coming up that I want to talk to you about. So this one stays to the south. It'll bring a little cloud cover into southwestern Ontario, but really more so in the morning hours. So that's not a problem for us. The high pressure continues to kind of dig in, and that protects us nicely, not only through Friday, but into Saturday as well. And then things start to change, not because of this system, but because of another Colorado low. So another system taking some Pacific moisture, developing in the Rockies and coming our way. So we watch Saturday. It starts off nicely. Then it's late day. We get the clouds moving in, and then it'll be Saturday night. We're going to see a bit of a mix, more rain showers towards the lakeshore, a risk of freezing rain. And then as the temperature spikes, the winds will ramp up a little bit, but it turns over to a rain event, most of it Saturday night into early Sunday, and then we'll be moving away, but the temperatures will come back down. So it'll be kind of mild on Sunday early in the day, and then they'll start to retreat. Minus 14 overnight tonight, minus 1 though for the high tomorrow with sunshine. That's going to feel really, really good. And a look into the weekend, there's that spike in the temperature Sunday morning, and then it'll come back down, but at least into next week, Dwight, temperatures look a little bit more reasonable than where they've been lately.
We need the thaw. We need the thaw. So
we're getting it.
Thank you,
okay?
Colette.
Yeah, you're welcome.
After the break, we'll take you to Iqaluit, where Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was supposed to make an apology to the Inuit people, but he couldn't land because of the weather. We'll tell you what he was going to apologize for after the break.
This weather update is brought to you by Fairmont Le Chateau Frontenac, the best location for your next spring break getaway in Quebec City.
Weather is playing havoc with the Prime Minister's trip to Iqaluit. A winter storm prevented his plane from landing. Another attempt will be made tomorrow if the weather improves. Justin Trudeau was supposed to deliver a formal apology for Ottawa's treatment of the Inuit during tuberculosis outbreaks in the mid-20th century. Many were taken from their homes for treatment without their consent or even an explanation to their families. As David Common tells us, tuberculosis is still a problem for modern Inuit.
Tuberculosis is thriving in Canada's north, and you may wonder how in a country as well off as Canada such a disease can happen. Well, it is because of housing. Look at buildings like this. These shacks, at times people live in them. Even larger buildings like the ones down there, they can have 20 people living in them at one time, sleeping in shifts because there simply isn't enough room. That kind of overcrowding, along with poor ventilation, are perfect conditions for tuberculosis to thrive. It is a disease that was brought here by colonial policies, by settlers, and it has continued to thrive at rates exponentially higher than in the rest of Canada. It is that history that the federal government has been looking at most recently amid demands for an apology. So what has happened is that people in the 50s and 60s particularly were taken from communities like this, snowmobile just going by here. They were taken not by snow machine but by ship away to communities in the south. Their families weren't told where they were going and often had no idea where they'd ended up. Some of those people died from tuberculosis and their families weren't told they died, weren't told where their bodies were buried or if their bodies had been buried. And that is something that has led to calls for an apology from the federal government. And that kind of thing now being greeted here in this country, in this area, in Nunavut. But at the same time, concerns continue to persist about tuberculosis that still exists in these communities, that has killed people, and that many people continue to fall sick with. David Commons, CBC News, Iqaluit.
All week, we've been sharing the stories of women who are disrupting the status quo in our She Means Business series. Today, we're talking to Elise Sherdell. She created an app called Date Night Babysitting, which helps connect parents with childcare. We discuss her journey in business, paying it forward, and why she feels her app is resonating with users.
I talk a lot about the mental load and how parents are balancing so many different things and so many different needs. And it's nice to have technical products that manage that process and make life easier.
We are at the Brookfield Institute right now, and you got a grant, right?
We did.
So talk about how important it is for female entrepreneurs to get this kind of hand up.
We were thrilled to get the Child Care Support Grant for Women Entrepreneurs to help connect women entrepreneurs growing scalable businesses with childcare so that they could go to networking events, so they can go to sales meetings, so they can work on their business, because childcare is such a huge barrier to women entrepreneurs.
And why is it important for you to give back? We know the answer, but we want you to explain it.
I'm an entrepreneur and a mom myself.
So you know what it's like, basically.
Yes, I know what it's like, exactly. I'm an entrepreneur and a mom myself, and I know how you're always trying to juggle, and just those few hours a week to have dedicated time to work on your business goes so far, especially for women starting and growing businesses.
You're a woman in tech?
I am indeed.
I got 2 daughters at home that I'd love to get into tech myself. Are you seeing more and more women in tech these days?
That is a tricky question. Definitely we're getting more women into tech.
Yes.
I think it's a matter of keeping them in tech with positive environments.
Like this?
Like this. Well, this grant will go so far because I think part of the issue is that we need some organizations led by women, technical organizations led by women who will build cultures that appeal to women, where women will want to work, and that's how you keep technical women.
Let's talk about the entrepreneurial side of this. Your experience, this is an example of a woman, like you're paving your own way here, you're creating your own path.
Indeed, we're working on it. We think it's important. We think representation is important, and we think building technology for families is important. We talk about FamTech, technology for families, which isn't even a word.
It's not.
AgTech, InsurTech, FinTech, those are words. And we see this huge gap in technology for families, and we intend to fill it.
Talk about the most difficult, like some of the challenges. What did you have to overcome to get to where you are now?
It's a long distance race, building a technology company, and access to capital is a big one. I mean, we all know that women's companies are underfunded. We produce a lot of revenue, but somewhere between 2 and 20% venture capital goes to women's companies, so there's no doubt that that's an issue.
We're going to finish with this, because you're doing it. What is your advice to the people or the women entrepreneurs trying to follow in your footsteps? What is your message for them?
Keep going. It's important. We need this work. We need these products. And you can't quit, and you just got to keep plowing forwards.
Like you're doing.
Doing my best.
Congratulations.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for making some time for us.
Thank you.
Smart lady there, leading by example. Here's a live look at your skyline tonight. Yesterday was the city's 185th birthday. After the break, more on that and the other big events that happened in Toronto this week in history. But first, as we head to break, we show you what food columnist Suresh Das calls the best kept secret in Toronto's path system.
So whoever comes us and asks want to have a spicy dish, then I recommend go for the beef vindaloo, which is a very delicious one. My name is Anthony Gomes. I'm the head chef of Touch Indian Restaurant at Wall of Flavor. We are located at 1 Allen Street East, Dynamic Fun Tower. Beef vindaloo is a traditional dish from the Goa, which comes from Goa side. It's basically made with your fenny vinegar. Fenny is a cashew which makes a vinegar. That's again the authentic. We don't find it here, but we try to use the white vinegar. It's a spicy, very spicy, and some vinegar strong flavor. So we make the basic sauce here, vindaloo sauce, then we mix with the beef curry. It's very good to have with a fresh naan or the garlic naan. It's very good. Even it's good with the rice, but I recommend you should go with the garlic naan or the plain naan. The garlic naan, we put some chili powder and some chaat masala. So the chaat masala has a tangy taste, which gives a good flavor to that.
Happy birthday, Toronto. This week in 1834, the town of York became the city of Toronto. Toronto was a lot smaller 185 years ago, going from the harbor north to just Dundas and from Bathurst to Parliament. 50 years ago to the day after Toronto became a city, the Toronto Public Library officially opened this week in 1884. This was the invitation to the opening of the first branch at church in Adelaide. It took over the old Mechanics Institute building. And this week in 1977, the Rolling Stones rolled into Toronto to play a secret show at the El Mocambo. Even Margaret Trudeau, then the wife of Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, showed up, spreading rumors about her relationship with frontman Mick Jagger.
So a lady goes to a rock concert. I don't think she can be faulted for disappointing the Canadian people.
I'm just going to step over here. God, it's a little sick tonight. Yeah, so what's
I'm
happening?
not coughing on you. Don't worry. We're all good.
Warm-up coming, but
Yeah.
let's talk about tomorrow first, I guess.
Yeah, let's just, we're going to see some sunshine, so that's something really refreshing,
Nice.
but also we're going to see some milder temperatures. So we still have to get through a really cold one tonight. Minus 14, feeling like minus 20. The extreme cold weather alert then still in place. But because of that high pressure, we may get a little bit of cloud cover at times during the day, but mostly it's going to be a sunny day for Friday. The high reaching to minus 1. It's going to feel so much better than it has the last few days. And it looks good in terms of the temperature and the first part of the day anyway, or most of the day on Saturday as well.
I'll let you save that voice. If I'm sick tomorrow, you know why. That's our show for tonight. Thank you for watching. Remember, a great discussion happening right now on our Facebook page ahead of International Women's Day tomorrow. Good night, everybody.